Hi, my name is Curtis Woods, and I have the joy and privilege of serving as Associate Executive Director for Convention Relations for the Kentucky Baptist Convention. And I want to introduce to you four of my good friends who have recently experienced a mission trip to Zimbabwe, South Africa, to serve alongside a missionary family known as Nick and Kendra Moore family. We had the great joy of going to the Baptist Seminary of Zimbabwe in order to minister to pastors as well as lay members all around the great country of Zimbabwe. I want to start to my right and allow each brother to introduce himself to you.
I'm C.L. Jordan.
Kevin Jones.
Joel Bowman.
Doug Williams.
C.L. Jordan actually serves as a pastor here in Louisville in the Portland area, Community Bible Church. Bible Community Church, amen, thank you. Bible Community Fellowship. Kevin Jones is an associate dean at Boyce College as well as leads within the teacher education program there. Joel Bowman serves as a pastor of Temple of Faith here in Louisville. And Doug Williams is our mission strategist for the Kentucky Baptist Convention. We have come together for one purpose, and that's to promote what our mission statement is for the Kentucky Baptist Convention. Some of you know that the Kentucky Baptist Convention has as a mission that we were created by churches, for churches, to help churches reach Kentucky and the world for Jesus Christ. In order to reach Kentucky and the world for Jesus Christ, that means we have to have servant leaders who are serving the local church with passion and with vision to see the gospel of Jesus Christ advance across the street as well as across the sea. For that reason, I am excited for Doug to talk a little bit about why he had a vision to see pastors, specifically African American pastors, coming alongside pastors and lay members in Zimbabwe in order to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Doug?
Thanks, Curtis. A little over a year ago, Curtis and I began to have a conversation about what it might look like for pastors here in Kentucky to be a part of training pastors in Africa. We specifically desired to see African American pastors here in the state of Kentucky partnering in Africa. And so as we began to have that conversation, the Moore family, about that same time, was planning on moving to Zimbabwe, where Nick was going to take over some responsibilities at the Baptist Seminary in Zimbabwe. And so I contacted Nick and asked him about bringing a group of men to come and help walk beside them and partner with them in this gospel endeavor. And so Nick was excited about it, and so we began to think through what that might look like. And we began to partner with Nick and the Baptist Seminary there, as well as World Hope Bible Institute that's located in Texas. One of the reasons that we wanted to specifically focus on theological training was because of the need that is throughout Africa, in particularly in Zimbabwe. While the gospel has been there for a number of years, the reality is this: in 1997, the International Mission Board made a decision to no longer send personnel to institutions, which included seminaries and Bible colleges. And over the years, we have seen the results of that pull away from institutions like the seminaries and Bible colleges, and there is just a dearth of theological training. And so we wanted to come alongside of people like Nick, who's teaching in the seminary there. I found recently that statistically there are about 5 million pastors outside of the U.S. It's estimated that 85% of those pastors have no theological training or have no access to theological training. If we were to boil that down into numbers that we might be able to understand, for the United States, there is one theologically trained pastor for about every 230 people. Wow. Internationally, there is one theologically trained pastor for about every 400,000 people. And so the need for theological training for pastors abroad is immense. And so we wanted to partner with these men because of the great training they have received here in the United States. and be able to pass that along to other men that are in the trenches, particularly in Zimbabwe, and help prepare them to be faithful ministers of the gospel.
Amen.
Amen.
So each of you brothers had the opportunity to teach a particular module. There were 3 modules. One was in biblical hermeneutics, soteriology, and expository preaching. Which one did you preach, Dr. Jordan?
Well, soteriology.
Soteriology. So how would you explain, how would you describe the experience of teaching soteriology there in Zimbabwe to your group? How did they receive it?
Well, it was received very well. I take it as a great opportunity to be able to share Christ wherever I go. But it was very well received. As Doug has mentioned, the gospel, you can tell, was there already. But just there were some terms and some things that they had not been familiar with that we had opportunity to share in that capacity, and it was such a great opportunity.
I like what you say when you say that the gospel was already there when we arrived.
That's right.
I think that's the way we should approach cross-cultural missions as servant leaders who are reciprocating in the learning process, and that's good. What did you teach, Dr. Jones?
Well, I had an opportunity to teach expository preaching, which was a delight.
Amen.
And fruitful time, training about 27 pastors from around the area, and their hearts just burned to know how to preach rightfully and how to exalt God just through the Bible. And again, these guys had practice and experience teaching and preaching, but being able to walk them systematically through how to teach, how to preach, just really, really blessed them and blessed me as well. So I had an opportunity to train those brothers and walk through multiple passages with them, and then even model each night after our 8 to 10 hours of teaching. Had an opportunity to model that very same thing in evening preaching.
Now, would you say that your participants made a great sacrifice in order to be there in terms of commuting hours and things of that nature?
I think a great sacrifice it may be a huge understatement. So I think again, these guys travel from long distances. I think 2 of the more extreme cases for me personally was one guy, 84, walked 12 miles.
84 years old, walked 12 miles.
84 years old.
In order to be trained in expository preaching.
In order to be trained in expository preaching.
Let's highlight that.
And sit on a steel beam in a one-room schoolhouse where the average temperature was well above 105 degrees.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot to learn from the brethren.
I'm telling you, a lot to learn from the brethren. The desire is there.
Amen.
Yeah.
And Brother Joel, you were teaching in what particular areas?
In Kwekwe and Bulawayo.
In Bulawayo.
Yes,
and your module that you taught was?
Soteriology as well as expository preaching.
Now, during your experience, tell us a little bit, when you first arrived, tell us a little bit about what happened when you were on deck and some of the things that God providentially did in order to use your background, your professional background, in order to minister.
Well, basically, the initial thing that God did in me was to help me to crucify my flesh as it pertains to my own self-centeredness. As Kevin just noted, the people in Zimbabwe were so hungry and so thirsty for the Word of God. And so my training is both in theology and clinical social work.
Okay.
And it worked out that I would go to a girls' home, a home that housed girls who had been abused, and I was able to preach to them and to encourage them. And I think me having a background in social work made me particularly sensitive to them.
Yes, indeed it does, and it did. One of the things that I appreciate about how God made that connection was, many of us would not have had the professional expertise in order to speak into that situation, but you naturally flowed into it.
Indeed.
Being an expository preacher yourself, pastor, theologian, but who also has formal education in clinical social work, that was a blessing.
It was.
Something we can't craft. Right. And I think that's the beauty of missions, because when people are on mission, you can plan your work and work your plan, but you got to take your hands off the plan.
That's right.
Well. I think Doug might be able to talk a little bit about taking hands off plans in terms of traveling and all these other things that we experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we do short-term missions, we we encourage teams to go with a plan and then go with the flow.
Right.
Yeah.
We had to do that on the way over, missing a flight really from the start that threw us off a whole day. Joel had prepared to preach on Sunday at a church there, and we weren't able to do that, but God used other opportunities for him to preach. But because of flight schedules, we missed that, and we just had to say, okay, Lord, you're in control here. We're trusting you.
Amen.
And so we got there when the Lord said it was time to get there.
Amen.
Yeah.
And then we hit the ground running.
Amen.
We went in different directions, 5 different directions, in fact, and we really didn't see each other until later in the week, and
Right.
were able to come back together and just share our experience. But in all of that, we just were taught to trust in God's plan.
Amen.
And to believe that He was orchestrating the events the way that He wanted.
That's right.
And Curtis, that reminds me, there's an old African proverb that says, when we tell God our plans, God laughs. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Is that we were sovereignly redirected to
Amen.
God's plan.
That's right.
Yes, and it's always for His glory and our good. You know, I think about the fact that when we talk about missions, historically missions in America, you know, oftentimes people say, well, where did the dearth of African Americans being involved with cross-cultural missions and mobilization? Why aren't there more African Americans on the field?
Yeah.
Would you want to speak to that a little bit? Why do we see in the 21st century a small number of African Americans serving full time?
Well, as we discussed while we were on the trip, historically, as early as the 18th century, African Americans actually led in missions.
Yes.
But later there were barriers that caused a delay, and then actually it caused African Americans not to have the opportunity to go. Slavery, of course, had something to do with that. Jim Crow, the cancellation of visas, and things of that nature have actually caused. And what happened is that the African American churches began to internalize their missions, and so now we have a great opportunity of mobilizing, re-educating, and redirecting our churches and our people, African Americans that is, into to missions, and understanding the global mandate, the biblical mandate for missions.
I like what you said, an opportunity at this particular juncture to re-educate.
That's right.
You know, and part of that re-education starts with identifying what the misperceptions were historically.
Absolutely.
So that when we say the first missionary, American missionary, or even Baptist missionary, we should say George Lyle.
Absolutely.
Since in 1782, he went to Jamaica.
He did.
So he precedes Adoniram Judson, he precedes William Carey.
Yes.
And there's work that's been done on that that proves that that's the fact that an African American actually served as one of our first Baptist missionaries.
Absolutely.
And I can appreciate Southern Baptist scholars like Danny Aiken as well as Jason Dusing. Danny Aiken serves as president at Southeastern Seminary. Jason Dusing is the provost at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. And they both have written on this particular reality because it is a truth that when we look at history, not necessarily from a colorblind perspective, but when we do historiography seeking to tell the truth about history, then we can always create that type of beauty. And so I appreciate you brothers having the willingness, first of all, and Doug, your vision to lovingly engage all the churches of the Kentucky Baptist Convention. Because when we say that we are one church, we are one church in Kentucky. Red, yellow, black, and white, we all are precious in this sight is not something that's trite. And I'm not trying to rap, even though I got but it is about what God is concerned about.
Good.
We had a great time, and I'm looking
Yes.
forward to seeing
Yes.
more brothers and sisters involved with missions to Zimbabwe in
Amen.
particular. Amen.
Amen.
It's been a great time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, brother.
It's been wonderful.
Amen.
God bless.